Welcome to week 8 of our revision. This week we are looking at paper 1 and we are looking at the internet versus the World Wide Web, URLs and DNS. Make sure you've got revision sheet 8 with you, given to you in lesson, ready to make notes and complete. Okay, to start off with, we've been looking at networks, we've looked at LANs and WANs to revise, and we talked about the internet being a large WAN. So we are comparing the internet to the World Wide Web. Is the internet and the World Wide Web the same? Simple answer is no, it's not. Okay, they are not the same thing. Good way to think about it is this. The internet is everything, all the hardware, all the systems, and the World Wide Web is one of the things that runs on the internet. There are other things such as email, instant messaging, chat, peer-to-peer networks and things that run on top of the internet. Put simply, the internet is a network of networks, all the devices that are connected all over the world. And it's based on the TCP/IP protocol, the hardware. So the internet is the hardware. The World Wide Web, however, is a collection of websites that are hosted on web servers for websites. And they are accessed using the HTTP protocol. They are the websites and the files themselves, and they are hosted on servers on the internet. Okay, so you can access the World Wide Web by using the internet. But you can't have the World Wide Web without it. You have to have the internet. So very simply, on the sheet, what is the internet? What is the World Wide Web? Checking your answers on the next slide. Okay, so very simply, the internet is a network of networks, all the devices, hardware, based on the TCP/IP protocol, where the World Wide Web is a collection of websites stored on web servers that are run on the internet, and they're accessed using the HTTP protocol, or HTTPS, but it's still the HTTP. Checking purple pen, adding to your answers. Okay, so now we know the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web. What is a URL? So how do you access a website on the World Wide Web? Well, you go to your web browser and you type in the URL at the top. For example, http://www.wikipedia.com, and then your website loads. This is the URL. Okay. Uniform Resource Locator. It's an address used to access web servers and resources stored on those web servers. You type it in and it appears. So the URL is made up of 3 main parts. The protocol that's used, for example, HTTP or HTTPS. The domain name, which is the main server where the website is stored, for example, amazon.co.uk. And then you've got the path to a specific page or file on that website or server. Now you could have, you can type access the website without a path. It would just take you to the home page on the website. Okay, so protocol, the rules to access the resource. Domain name is the server that the resource is on. And the path is a specific location or file on that server. So think about this. Why do we use URLs? Why do we have these addresses? Well, very simply, it's much easier for humans to remember a website URL, for example, www.amazon.co.uk or HTTP, than an IP address like 178.236.6.251. It's much easier for humans to remember. So, complete the section on the URL, please. What does it stand for? What's the benefit or purpose? And label the main parts. Checking your sheet with purple pen. URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. It's a standard, uniform way of accessing or locating resources on the internet. What is the benefit or purpose? It's much easier for humans to remember with words than an IP address, and it links to a specific website or resource that's stored on a web server. And what are the three parts? You've got the protocol, you've got the domain name, and you've got the path to the page or file. Purple pen, adding correcting, please. Okay, final part for today. We know the difference between the internet and World Wide Web. We know what URLs are. The last part is understanding how your computer displays that website. So think, when you type in the website URL, https amazon.co.uk, how does it appear on your screen? So remember, websites are stored on web servers somewhere on the internet, but you don't know where. So you need to use a URL. You could type in the IP address if you know it directly, but unfortunately it's very hard to remember the IP address of a server or website. So we need to use URLs. But how does it work? We've already talked about this, so I'm going to skip through this 1 second. Your computer needs to know which server on the internet that website is stored on. To do that, it needs to find the IP address, and it uses a service called DNS, a domain name server. DNS is a server that translates and looks up the website's domain name, for example, amazon.co.uk, and translates it into its IP address, for example, 150.20.211.96. So it looks up the IP, the URL you type in, and gives you back the IP address. In this case, that was the DNS server, and that was the amazon.co.uk. Without the DNS, we didn't know that was amazon.co.uk. So, main points. DNS stands for Domain Name Server. Websites are stored on servers called web servers, somewhere on the internet. There are thousands of them. DNS is a special server that stores the IP addresses of the web servers, a bit like a telephone directory. It's got a database. So the purpose of DNS is to translate the URL of a website, for example, bbc.co.uk, into its IP address. There. That is the purpose of DNS. A little bit more detail. How does it work? For higher marks, you could be asked this. You, the user, websites are stored on web servers on the internet. The user types in a website into their browser, like Google Chrome. You type in the website to the top. The web browser sends the URL request to the DNS server, sends it through the internet to the DNS. The DNS server then looks up the IP address of the URL that you've sent it to it. If it finds the IP address, it will then send the IP address back to the user. And then the user, the client's computer, will then use the IP address to directly access the website. Now it knows where it is. So the purpose of DNS translates the URL into the IP address. A little bit simpler to make it easier for you. User types in the URL. The DNS receives the request for the domain. The DNS looks up the IP address in its database. And then DNS returns the IP address to the user so it can access the website. Okay, on your sheet, fill in the sections. You could be asked any of these in the exam. You could be asked to describe it or to fill in questions about it. Do that now, please, and then check your answers. Okay, purple pen time. DNS stands for Domain Name Server. It translates the domain name of a website into its IP address. How does it work? User types in the URL into their web browser. DNS receives the request for the domain name or the URL. DNS looks up the IP address of the domain name in its database. And the DNS returns the IP address to the user so it can access the website. Really important, you purple pen, add any detail, any bits you may have missed. Final task for this week, as always, go to LearnCodeIn, complete revision quiz 8 for this week. As always, click check, correct the question if you got it wrong. You're aiming for 100%. See you in lesson.